the intolerances we may have had to a whole social group. And that's research has proven that you can just do that by speaking with one person.
Yeah.
It can shift your intolerance to that whole social group. And so if we all do this, if we all just reach out to one person and understand from their perspective, how is that going to change the world?
Melting Pot, a global podcast series hosted by Payal, connects guests who have inspiring stories and reaches out to a multicultural audience over 52 countries. Guests are diverse, such as celebrities, entrepreneurs, travelers, and many more who've had a turning point in their lives and moved over to a holistic lifestyle. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, social media. Hi everyone. Today I am in conversation with Andrea Putting. She's talking to me from Melbourne and I am in Singapore. Andrea is the founder of podcast Chocolate and Coffee Breaks. She is a best-selling, award-winning author. She's also a speaker and a publisher. And I find the name of her publishing house very interesting. It's just called Putting Words. So we're going to hear a lot more from Andrea about that. So I also want to add that she refers to herself as a social mission revolutionary. And I think that's also very interesting. So I can see that there's a lot of different aspects to Andrea, which we're going to try in this conversation to put together. Thank you so much, Andrea, for joining me today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today.
Great. Andrea, let's start with a little bit about your background and what actually led you to start your podcast, Chocolate and Coffee Breaks, and why did you actually call it that? Why did you title your podcast as Chocolate and Coffee Breaks?
Ooh, chocolate and coffee. It's an interesting combination, isn't it? And a lot of people just hear about chocolate and coffee and go, I'm in, without even hearing any of the background or anything about what it's about. They just want to have chocolate and coffee. So it's something that started back in 2014. Chocolate and coffee started in 2015, but it was stimulated by an event that happened in 2014. And it was a tragic event and one that shook Australia. A gunman walked into a chocolate cafe and took everyone hostage. He was a Muslim and claiming to do this in the name of Allah. And he held them for, it was quite a long siege. And in the aftermath, we were left with 2 innocent victims and the gunman being left dead. Because he was a Muslim, there was this fear there'd be retaliation against the Muslim community because that's what was happening at the time, that kind of energy. But instead of that, what happened was the Australian people reached out and with the hashtag I will ride with you, they flooded social media with it. 150,000 people, which in our country of Australia's size is phenomenal, especially mostly that in Sydney, because that's where the event happened. And so instead of reaching out in hate and terror, it was an outpouring of love and acceptance. Now, I'm sure that you would like to live in a society where everyone is loved and accepted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That really sat with me, that this is what we want in our society, but we don't speak up. We don't say that we want the peace and love is what we want. We don't stand up. We don't speak up for those who have been oppressed, for those who have had prejudice against them. We don't stand up and say, no, that's wrong. We just sit on the sidelines.
Yeah. So what are the kind of conversations that your podcast actually has? Do you talk to people who are experts in various fields, or do you talk to the common person who may have who may have experienced, who is an immigrant maybe and has taken time to integrate with society? What are the different kind of topics that you discuss with your guests?
Yeah. So I haven't done a lot with the podcast, but I will be coming back to that very
Okay.
soon.
Okay.
Because the concept of chocolate and coffee is to try and get other people, and encourage other people to sit down with someone and have a conversation with them, listen to their stories and understand their perspective. So with the podcast that I've done, I was modeling that. So I wasn't talking to experts in the field. I was talking to everyday people about their experiences and getting down to what has been what's happened in their life as, say, an immigrant. So I've spoken to people from a whole lot of different aspects. It's not just the immigrants, it's different religions, it's sexual orientation, it's mental health, a whole lot of different things where people feel like they've had some kind of prejudice against them. So it's really interesting exploration and just being able to listen to people's stories. And that's really what I try to encourage people to do with having a chocolate and coffee break, is to listen to understand. Because often we just listen to so that we can respond and we can get our word in and what we think and how we feel. But this is not a time for that. This is a time for listening to somebody, listening to their experiences and how it's affected them. And then finding that common ground between us on our values, the way we see the world. We often have very similar concepts and ideas, or we all have that thing of we want to have family and friends and safe places to live, and all those things are common to us. So if we get back to some of those things and see that this person that really seemed to be so different is just the same as us.
Yeah.
And just breaking down those concepts that somebody is different, so we can't interact with them, or that we don't have anything in common. We always have something in common.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we do this, it does help to break down the barriers. And from that, it shifts the intolerances we may have had to a whole social group. And research has proven that you can just do that by speaking with one person.
Yeah.
It can shift your intolerance to that whole social group. And so if we all do this, if we all just reach out to one person and understand from their perspective, how is that going to change the world?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, totally. Do you think that I can see your books and they're like attracting me to ask you about your writing? So, when did you actually become an author? And tell us a little bit about what is it that what resonates with you and your writing?
Yeah, I had to sum this up just recently about what all of the aspects of the things that I do, whether it's chocolate and coffee, whether it's the books that I've written with social mission and my publishing. And I came down to that one thing, that when we touch one person's life, we change the world. So it makes it one person.
Yeah.
Because it changes the world for them.
Yeah.
It changes the way they see things, the way they interact with other people, and that ripples out into the world. So that is the one thing that I come back to all of the time. So with publishing, it's getting your message out in the world. That changes people's lives. With social mission, we can change the world in a whole lot of ways with our social impact. And with chocolate and coffee, when you're listening to one person, you're changing their life. So that is my overriding, my thing that gets into the middle of everything that I do
Yeah,
is,
there's a common
yeah,
thread between all of what you do. Yeah, no, that's interesting because even for me, my two shows that I produce and host, excuse me, Melting Pot and Now Boarding, has exactly the same objective, which is that through all the conversations that I have, and both the shows are so different from each other, but the common link is that every single conversation, if it can make a difference to even, as you've said, one person, I think I feel fulfilled. It's again similar to, okay, I don't have multiple ways in which to do it, multiple sort of sources in terms of publishing, in terms of a podcast, and in terms of being a writer. But for me, just my two podcast shows, I feel are enough to be able to create this impact. And that's my mission and that's my objective. So I completely understand where you're coming from. And I really appreciate that because, again, I'm not the only one who thinks like that. And that's what makes us also in this conversation understand each other and where we're coming from. So no, that's,
absolutely.
yeah, no, that's
Yes.
very, very interesting. So I wanted to ask you, do you think technology can in any way deeper, like foster deeper connections between people rather than superficial connections? Or do you think technology, in terms of connecting people, is more a hindrance because then it's not like a physical contact with people? Where do you think technology is, because it's rapidly growing and it's becoming an integral part of our lives? So
Hmm.
where do you think it is in your perspective?
Yeah, technology is, I think it's a bit of both. We've got to appreciate the fact that here I am in Melbourne and you're in Singapore and we're able to have this conversation. Now, some people find that they can't connect on a, I'm going to use the word intimate, on an intimate level on the internet over having conversations, but I believe that you can. For me, I feel like I'm privileged to be able to have some really deep and beautiful conversations over the internet because, and I think that's because that's my intention. So I'll often have a chocolate and coffee break with someone over the internet, which means that I've got a broader scope of people that I can connect with. So I can connect with people from all over the world, and that gives me new and wonderful perspectives. However, there is still that something special about connecting in person that we can't deny. And I would, of course, prefer to be able to connect with everyone in person, but that's not possible. So it's the next best thing. And because it expands our horizons, that is a good thing.
How do you reach out to people who are first time authors and who do not have the means of going, because it's a very competitive business, and to actually get to a publishing house which is established, there are thousands and thousands of wannabe authors and they struggle. So how do you reach out to first time authors? Is there any kind of guidelines that you would want to share in terms of how you help
Yep,
time authors?
sure. So what I do is like is what they call hybrid publishing. So it's, I guess, self-publishing, close to self-publishing, but you've got somebody else going through those steps for you. So the important things that a new author needs to do is to write their book, get their message into the world. And if they need that, I can get them, I can point them towards a couple of book coaches to help them with that. And so it's really important that they get their book edited and they have people read their book so that they can refine their message and make sure that it makes sense to somebody else. Because I find when I write, and then if I go back to it sometime later or somebody else is reading it, there's often things missing. I will use the wrong word. So sometimes I have it read back to me by just the word program and realize that I've used the wrong word. I've used what instead of want, or things like that. Or I've left out words. It's really interesting the things you do when you write for yourself. But when you read back, you know what it's supposed to say. So you bypass, you don't see the errors.
Yeah.
And you leave things out, things don't make sense, they're in the wrong order. You need someone to help you with all that. So when somebody works with me, I help them to ensure that their book is on brand for them. We do the cover design, we do the inside design. Now, I really enjoy doing that aspect of it to create a bit of an artistry in the book so that when somebody picks up the book and they open it up, they want to read it. It looks easy to read and follow. It's just personalized to the person's branding, to their message, so that it has the essence of them when people are reading it. And I really love doing that. And I get their books up on where they need it to be so that it's in Amazon, so it's on print on demand, so that it's available internationally on online booksellers. So that's one of the things that I do, that within a few weeks of putting the book into where it needs to go, that they'll go online and they'll find their book available all around the world on internet booksellers, which is a real buzz when you see it on a website in a different language. The book's still in English, but to see the book described on different languages, that's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I help them to become an Amazon bestseller. So we go through the campaigning of creating an Amazon bestseller, and all my publishers love to do that. And we have a real buzz around that launch date to become that. So we guide them through getting that happening and making sure that they've got the audience happening ready for this launch so that they can become an Amazon bestseller. So it's fairly full program for me, getting this book from their point from them handing it to me to becoming a bestseller. But it's exciting. It's a really exciting process to see their book come alive and for them to get that day when their book arrives and they've got it in their hands. And there's nothing quite like that moment.
I can imagine. Yeah. So you've really got your hands full, and I really appreciate this conversation with you, Andrea. I know that we could keep talking because there's so much to share and exchange and learn from you, but I guess at some point I have to bring an end to the conversation. But I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you. I appreciate what you're doing, and keep up the good work. And I'd love to hear more of your chocolate and coffee break episodes. Are you on the different streaming platforms like I am?
Yes, I am. And I also have podcast Social Mission Revolution. They've both been on a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm going to be bringing them together in some way very soon to create something new. I'm looking forward to that.
Look forward to it as well. So thank you, and you have a wonderful rest of the day.
For more weekly conversations, do listen to Melting Pot on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts. Follow us on YouTube and on Instagram at Podcast Melting Pot. So until the next episode, this is Payal signing off.